Welcome to Life in the Bricks podcast, where we talk to real people about programs that enhance our community so that we can build bigger and better portfolios while providing options for our residents to achieve self-sufficiency. I'm your host, Tony McGinnis, Executive Director, CEO with the Huntsville Housing Authority.
Welcome. Man, I'm so excited about today's episode of Life in the Bricks podcast. I want to thank Kiki, who's behind the scenes, as always, for doing such a great job. My co-host could not join me today, Fred McGinnis, but I'm sure he's going to hate that he missed this episode, but I understand he had other things to do today that wouldn't allow him the opportunity to be here. Today, man, I have a friend, a brother who goes way back. I've been knowing this brother since kindergarten. And when I tell you, man, we grew up in the same neighborhood. We've shared some memories and some stories, and I can't wait to get into this episode of the podcast. I have none other than Mr. Shaf Muhammad. Shaf, how you doing, man? Tell the people a little bit about yourself. How you doing?
Man, I am fantastic. I am looking forward to this conversation. I believe this is my first podcast, so it's all good. I am an aspiring speaker, inspirational speaker, life coach, mindset coach, all that good stuff. So, father of quite a few youngsters that are still coming up, right? Both of us grew up here in this great city of Huntsville, so we're here. I'm glad to be here, glad to be seen, glad to see you, and glad to be a part of your podcast.
Man, I'm excited to have you here, man. I really appreciate you taking time out, and sharing with us today. I think this is going to be a real episode. It's one thing to read a book. It's another thing to write a book. And it's altogether another thing to share in the same story. And we definitely share in the same story, man, growing up in the neighborhood that we grew up in. It definitely was a challenge, but I'm sure after today you'll be able to understand that once again, dandelions do come through concrete. And I'm excited to have another dandelion on the call tonight or today. So just as we get started, man, I just want you to kind of share what your experience of living in public housing was and really, man, how it helped shape your life. If you can just talk a little bit about that and any advice you might have on that particular topic.
Okay. We had a signal delay right there. Was that me or was that, I don't know, but I think you were asking to share experience of growing up in
public housing and how that helped shape your life.
The experience is our foundation, man. As you know, my experience was all of our experiences to some degree, shape, form, or fashion. Uh, there's a saying that I used to say years ago, especially as I was coming through, and it's fitting in the question you ask. I was a product of my environment, right? I was a product of my environment, and all of us are products of that environment that took different paths, right? And had different experiences as a result of that particular environment, right? There are a ton of positives. Um, and because I am one that believes that, you know, all things work together for the good, I draw on all of the good that I received as a result of coming through that experience. As you know, there are many of our young people, young friends, right, that didn't make it uh, to 2024 to be able to talk about how coming up in that environment shaped them because they didn't make it through, right? There are so many different things that I can point to in terms of how it shaped me. that sense of community, that sense of, of lifelong uh, connections that are still present today, like we have, um, and then just family. Like we had, even if father wasn't present, mother was present. I didn't grow up with my biological father, but I had all of these other men that I drew from. Some I drew mostly a lot of negative stuff that I probably shouldn't have drawn from that. But today I am able to look at those experiences and speak from those experiences. And now when I'm doing uh, some of my mindset coaching, some of my speaking that I don't call motivational speaking, I call it inspirational speaking. A lot of the inspiration that I draw from now, I have that experience coming up in public housing uh, as a foundation from which I'm able to draw from, because I can look back at from where I come, from where we come, and I can give a tremendous amount of praise and thanks, knowing that okay, there's a good chance that we were not to be here, but we are here, and I think we're here for a reason. But there's so many different things we get from that upbringing that makes me to say I have no regrets at all, because we come up in one of the if I can say roughest areas, roughest communities in the city at that particular time. So
Man, that's
hopefully that answers the question somewhat.
yeah, it did, man. That was a powerful response, and I appreciate it. It kind of leads right into my next question on, what do you feel some of the biggest challenges you face living in public housing, and talk about how you were able to overcome them.
Some of the biggest challenges, looking back and understanding it better now, one of the biggest challenges for me is just positive influences, like having those positive influences. And if I had to grab the first thing that came to mind when you asked that, was just having my biological father in my life, right? Many of us came up in that environment and we didn't have biological father in the picture. And I'm understanding now as a father the importance of having that father in the ear of a young child, especially a young black boy coming up in that environment, right? So if I had to point to one major challenge, that would be one, because I made choices that my children would never make. Even when I share with them some of the choices I made as a young boy, young adult, they look at me and just stare at me for a few seconds and ask, like, for real, Dad? For real, you did that? Like, you experienced that? Yeah, I experienced that. And one of the things I always tell them when they are feeling some type of way about how tough I am on them, right? And it's tough love sometimes, but definitely love, is that I didn't have a me in my life like you all do, right? I didn't have a me in my life. If I am to point to one of the bigger challenges, that was definitely a challenge, because we come up in an environment where people were who they were. They were doing the best that they could based on what they were working with. They also were the products of some type of environment that shaped them to be who they are, right? And God, I mean, thank God that we were able to come away from it and make better choices. Myself, I had to go through a few things to come to better decision making. But that would be one of the bigger challenges right there for me, man, is just being surrounded by more positive influences. But again, I have no regrets, because if I didn't have those experiences, I'm not the man I am today. And I am fantastically proud of the man that I am today and the man I'm growing into as a result of still being here to grow into that man.
Yes, sir. You talked about it, and I think it's really it's definitely still a problem in the community. even today, and I think about that a lot, especially more here lately than I've thought about it here in a couple of years now. The missing element of the father in the community and what that can do to the mentality and to the the foundation of young people, not only boys but girls who grew up in these neighborhoods, man, who need positive fathers who can help guide them. And we are missing out so much on the nuggets that fathers can give to young people, and whether it be a young boy or a young girl, man. And so I definitely can appreciate that comment. I was fortunate to have my dad involved. Saw him pretty much every day. He ended up working at the housing authority, and it gave me more opportunities to see him. And so I know the impact of what that looks like because he was there. And man, I'm actually looking at starting some type of fatherhood initiative in the neighborhoods, because these young men who are growing up right now need us now more than ever before. They needed us back then. We needed fathers back in the neighborhood then, but we also need them now, man. And it's we don't even have men who volunteer like they used to volunteer back when we were growing up. So we need a big push to get more men involved in the community. And I'll say this: men that look like us in the
Correct.
community, because oftentimes our young people, they don't think we can meet the standard, and we need to show them that we can show up and we can lead and we can model good behavior as well. So they need young men who look like us, because when they see us, they can see themselves. So, man, I appreciate that answer. We talked about, you hit on it earlier, and you talked about community, and everybody that I have on the show talks about community. I want you to talk about community and how the relationships you built with your neighbors really impacted you and impacted your life. How was that with relationships and family with folks you grew up with in the neighborhood?
Well, a lot of that community aspect of our community is still with me to this very day, because there was a lot of love underneath the experience of living in public housing, in particular, Mason Court, Terry Heights area. There was a lot of love underneath the experiences that I draw from to this very day. Um, Especially when I see some of the people that are still around, um, that were like aunties and uncles to us. Uh, One particular one that I think of right now as I'm talking about this is a gentleman that I looked at as an uncle, but more so probably a father figure, right? Who to this very day, um, I still get the holiday text messages from. I still get an occasional phone call from to this very day. And this was somebody that would run me off from different parts of the community or areas that I wasn't supposed to be in at, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, 12 years old, like would run my butt home and eventually watch me come up in the community. And even though he's seen me getting off of the straight and narrow, if I were ever on a straight and narrow, but seeing me going in directions that would land me, in detention centers and jail and eventually prison and all this stuff. This was somebody who watched me go through that, stuck with me, continued to encourage me, and to this very day, I still hear from. We still see some of these people that are still around who remember those times, who show us love. And it was underneath everything that we were going through, it still was a lot of love in the community that, just you asking the question makes me to reach back and just remember, not to mention all the people that would, or the few, I won't say all, but the few, because there were only a few like that would come out to the community to be a part of the community that wanted to be uh, to be a positive, that positive influence, right, to the community and help out in any way that they could. That made the community aspect of it even stronger because we were able to see not so much of bullying or situations going on that if we look back on now, it wasn't really good for us, and we can realize just how blessed we are to be here. But I want to just reflect on the loving aspect of it, man. All those that loved on us in the absence of our mothers, right? In your case, your father as well, right? And I can look back at your mom, right? Everybody knew who Auntie Vicky was, right? It was, I mean, I wouldn't do nothing crazy in front of your mom, right? And likewise, just
Hmm.
that aspect of the community was strong for us, right? So, um, and just speaking on the overall community, man, that's a big one for me because we see some of those people to this very day, if they're still around, and it's number love.
And you touched on it. Every time, I mean, there are people in your life who are just genuine. And when you see these individuals, man, like you said, it's nothing but love. I mean, it's true, genuine love that is you really can't explain it other than that word love. And so
Yeah,
people come into the community now and they think they have to teach us how to have community. And one of the things that I tell them is, man, you don't have to teach folks who live in the inner city back in the day how to have community. We had community. If we didn't have, my neighbor
yeah,
had, which meant I
yeah,
had.
right,
And there was no shame in that because we were community. If somebody needed a ride, whoever had the car would take them to where they needed to go. So we had community. And I think that's why when you see somebody today, man, it ain't nothing but love because only thing you look back and you're just like, man, this person made it. You know,
right.
they made it out. And so when you see them, you're right. It ain't nothing but love.
Number love, none but love, for real. Yeah, I mean, we got some experiences to draw from, man. Like, we indirectly learned community through all of our experiences. I mean, from we probably didn't learn a whole lot about politics, but we learned a lot about family, and our children were able to come up experiencing some of the things we experienced with sport, and some of the decisions we made. We able to teach our children some things that, man, if we hadn't experienced that level of community in that environment, there's no way we could prepare them to be thriving in the world like they're doing to this very day, right? And
Hmm.
not everybody that came through even made it to this moment, right? But those of us that made it through, and there are some stories, man. There are some people that have had some tough times to make it to this day, right? And to be able to reach back on some of those experiences is golden. And I would go so far as to say that there are many that if they were to talk about some of the things that we experience in a community, they would say like me, we don't necessarily have any regrets because we're able to pull from all the good that came from it, all the positives. Okay, whether it was tough at the time or not, we were able to look back and able to look back today and say, you know what, we learned a tremendous deal about a lot of different things.
Right, right, right. And
Yeah,
so just with me sitting in this seat right now and being, you know, a person who can change policy and influence policy, man, I think about all the young people who are coming after us who need that sense of community, and we got to find a way to get back to it so that they can understand that their situations is temporary and they got to find a way to move on. So I want to talk about this, man. What are some of the positive aspects of the or support systems that were in public housing at the time that you found particularly valuable during your time there? What are some of those positive things that were taking place in the community that you felt, you know, were gave you an outlet or something to do?
that's a fantastic question, right? And this is where for me, it gets gooder, if you will, in terms of just being able to speak on our community and from where we come, right? Um, we had the Boys and Girls Club, right? We had that. We had the recreation piece, which was huge for us, man. Um, for those of us that participated in that, right? I can think back to different things that the center would do. I don't know if it was Boys and Girls Club then or not, but different people would do. I can remember practicing Beat It, Michael Jackson, Beat It, right? Practicing the moves for that, right? I don't know who organized that, but I can remember positive things like that were attempted, right? I can remember, I can remember and I mean the basketball games we would have on the basketball courts and even football games, man, right? Like these youngsters don't know nothing about this now, but man, we played fat football with no pads, right? It was tackling, right? We would do things like that. But when it comes to that, the support that will come into the community, people like said Worry, his name comes to mind, right? Um, what's my man's name? Bright skinned brother.
Eugene.
Eugene. People like that comes to mind, right? Mr. Found, people like that come to mind. Of just people that didn't necessarily live in the community, but were, and many others that I may be missing, but people like that will come to the community that didn't have to, like they didn't live there, they didn't have to come in, right? And then personally speaking, on a personal note, I had brothers from the Nation of Islam, brother David X. Like anytime I'm talking about my life and how my life was transformed, brother David X, who come out there and stand on the block with us. And I probably had drugs on me. Ain't no telling what I had in my pocket. Probably had a gun in my back or something. Like, but this brother was not scared to come and be a part of the community and let me know without saying it, you know what, bro, I love you. And I see more in you than you see in yourself. Right. And that stuck with me to this very day. He got me to reading again. Thank God for that fourth and fifth grade teacher that you and I can always look over at, and just, I mean, I can hug them right now and they're not even here in terms of what they did for us. And you talk about support, you talk about love, right? Miss Bernie Palmer, Teresa Anderson, who made sure that we were strong academically. I could go right now to any college campus and thrive because of those women and what they did for just our self-esteem alone, not to mention our intellect at that age, right? So all these different people, man. And then we had the Darnell Shoppersons of the world, right? The Eric Thomases of the world, number one motivational speaker in the world today. But this was a brother who was homeless and all these different things, and talk about community support. You're talking about community grabbing a hold of somebody who was wayward. Eric was taken in by a pastor in Detroit, Michigan, and this pastor sent him to Huntsville, Alabama to go to Oakwood College. And because of that sense of community that he was blessed with, he wanted to give it back to somebody. And he came out to little old Mason Court, man, public housing, and reached a few of us, myself included, with this program, Break the Cycle. And it was an attempt to help those of us that had dropped out of high school to get our GED. I was one of his first graduates of that program. And man, look, things like that, right? When you talk about community support, we have to see more of that. And I'm telling you, I will just say right now in this podcast and in conversation, personally speaking, I think about this all the time in terms of wanting to give back more. So I say to you publicly, you have to grab people like myself more to help you in your role. Like we have to make time for that. And I want to do it. And I've already made a commitment to myself that I would be doing it, just getting back in the community more to be what David X was to me, to be what the Cedric Worries of the world was to us. The Eric Thomases at that time, to which I think he needs to talk about a little bit more in his talks. He deserves to talk a little bit more about the community he was in at that time and the people he helped. When he brings me out to speak, we talk about it, but I don't hear him talk about it as much. But that type of support changes communities, man, and changes cities, and therefore we know our country can be changed as a result of it. But it starts at that base level in our community.
Man, that was deep, man. And you mentioned Terry Heights. I feel like the teachers at Terry Heights gave every young person a foundation to be great. And that principles we had, the teachers, it was community. So I'm glad you mentioned that. And in particular, some of the teachers who were there, man, because again, all of those were very, very, they were pillars in our community, man. And we looked up to them. And I think our parents respect them. They respected our parents. That was
Absolutely.
our village. Even before the term was coined, it takes a village. We had a village. So definitely appreciate you saying that. What are some of the misconceptions or stereotypes do you think people often have about public housing residents? And how do you, as a young man who come from the situation, how do you address those stereotypes?
One of the major stereotypes is and the stereotypes we get, especially because first of all, people look at housing communities like that. They call it ghetto, they call it projects, or whatever the case may be. One of the stereotypes is that this type of living began with us as a people, as Black people, right? Which is not necessarily okay. We're not the only somebody who lives in housing communities like that, right? But I'll go on from that to say that there's a major stereotype, period, when it comes to us as a people, that Black, white, red, yellow have to look at the stereotype that says, you know what, because I'm Black or brown, that I may not necessarily be up to par with somebody who's not Black or brown, right? That's one of the first stereotypes that should be totally canceled out of people's mind right now, because we have thrived in every area, every sphere of endeavor that one could even imagine, right? If we really dove off into that, February or Black History Month, it wouldn't be a month. It'd be like a year, right? It'd be years, right? That is a major stereotype that deserves to be dispelled immediately, because many people walk around with this and don't even know they walk around with this stereotype of this color barrier, right? This race barrier. So I want to start there, though it may not necessarily be the start, but I want to start there. And also I want to say this about the stereotypes. You have people now, they'll shake my hand now, they will do business with me today, and they will have no problem with interacting with me today. But if they would have met me at 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, 18 years old, even early 20s for that matter, they wouldn't want to be around me in that way, do business with me in that way. And they would have every right to have some of the stereotypes in their mind. The stereotype that I want to be dispelled is a stereotype that says that the little young Black boys or girls out in the community that is a Shaf Muhammad cannot be redeemed. Okay? I tell people all the time this, T, and I mean it with everything in me. That's the reason why I do the work that I do now, why I feel like I'm called to speak to the heart and mind of a human being now, is that when you look up the word redemption in the dictionary, it should be a picture of me there. right? And it makes me to know that I have no right to have a preconceived notion about anybody not being able to be reached. That's my point. Because there's a lot of people that are looked at in our community, and they're looked at as persona non grata, like we can't touch them, like they can't be reached. Like I stand in the gap to as a witness bearer, right? As proof positive, like you too, right? We come from the same community, right? You're sitting here, executive director, CEO of the entire deal, right? We stand in the gap to dismiss, stample upon, throw away this preconceived notion that our young people or people in general who happen to come from that environment can't make it do what it do in the world, right? Because I have no doubt in my mind that we can go anywhere in the world and survive as a result of where we come from. Because if we can make it out of that, listen, T, I go nowhere where I'm afraid. Nowhere. Okay. Because I feel like, you know what, man, I done been there, I done done that, right? And I want to be able to share that with more and more of our young people, ages 14 to 24 with me. Ages 14 to oh no, excuse me, ages 14 to 22. And I choose that age frame, age spot, because that's where I felt like I was the most lost in my life. I feel like I was the most lost in my life. So I want to be able to give back to that particular age range because I know without a doubt, I don't have to feel like it. I know now that I was completely lost in that time, right? And it was nothing that a little knowledge and understanding and pure D love couldn't dismiss. So one of the preconceived notions, and I can sum it up this way, is that you know what, you can love on these that you feel like don't necessarily deserve your love. And if you really, really want to reach them, and I tell coaches this all the time. I tell leaders who are leading people all the time. Like if you really want to have some impact and influence in the life of people that you're leading or coaching, okay, how about learning about what love is and be about that? That ain't meaning you got to go talk about how much you love. I love you. I love you. I love you. No, no, no. It's an action word, right? And you can show. That's why we can talk about the Bernie Palmers of the world, the Teresa Andersons of the world today, because we know they loved us. Like we know without can't nobody that was under them can say, you know what, they didn't love us like that. No, they
Hmm.
loved us, man. And they didn't say it all the time. Okay, they tell me that now more than ever, right? But at that time I felt it, though I didn't understand what I was feeling. But now I understand. Now I get it, right? So that's a big one right there, T. Um, that preconceived notion that these people will never do nothing, be nothing, don't want to do nothing, be nothing. That one right there, we have to really, really, really like throw away out of our spirit, out of our mind, because we never know what's sitting up behind that person who's looking like they don't want to do nothing, don't want to be nothing, and all they want is a handout. The handout we deserve to give them is a hand up, not a handout, but a hand up in the way of love for them.
Man, that was loaded. That was loaded. You talked
Oh man.
about ages 14 to 22 being a very critical time for you. One of my favorite rappers of all times, Biggie, said this: either you're selling crack or you're hooping, or he said it, either you're selling crack rock or you got a wicked jump shot back in the
Mm,
day.
mm,
And I remember that. And I remember how impactful that was for community. You talked about that being a very crucial time, and you feel like you were at your most lost during that period of time. But then you also talked about redemption and where you are now as a father, a leader, a motivator. Talk about that just for a second on how you can go from, because I think it's so important that our young people understand that if you're traveling down a road, at some point you're going to come to a fork in the road, and you got to make a decision. But if you make the decision that you feel was not the best, you can turn around and go the other way.
No doubt.
Talk to us about that for a minute.
No doubt. Thank you for sharing that verse in one of Biggie's songs. I never ever relate to it in that way, but it's so true. At that time, there were people. I thought I had a jump shot too. I really thought I had a jump shot later on in life when I shouldn't have been thinking that. But it's so true. Right? There were people that had the jump shot or who had the speed. They were doing different things in sport and play, or there were those of us that had the crack rock, like myself. I had the crack rock and everything else you can think of, the guns and the violence and all type of foolishness that I was involved in that time of my life, right? But there's a scripture in the Bible that I love to refer to, and it has everything to do with redemption for me, and that's Hosea 4:6. God talking, or one of the prophets talking, and the scripture says, "My people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge, because thou has rejected knowledge." And then it goes on to say, "Because you have rejected knowledge, I will also reject you." Right? Once the knowledge piece was made understandable in my spirit, it was game over, right? It wasn't that I wasn't knowledgeable about different things. It's just all about a matter of environment. There were some things that I leaned into because I seen it firsthand in my house with my family, right? And when I go outside, I seen it, right? So I was a product of my environment. But I am a strong advocate right now, and not believer, but knower that knowledge is power. But more so than even that, that knowledge is not just power in and of itself. It's potential power. Because there will be people that listen to this podcast and they will hear how this young man who experienced this in the bricks, right? And experienced that in the bricks, and home and jail and prison and been shot, been stabbed, been cut, all these things that I've experienced. There will be people that hear this and continue to make the decision that send them down the same path that I was on, right? Which is why it's so important for people like myself not only to give a talk here or there, but to be present in the community where you can feel, touch, hug somebody that have been there, done that. Because like I said earlier, we have people, man, that we can point to, that are not here today. They didn't make it to 2024. They didn't make it out of their 20s because they made decisions that were not based on sound knowledge and principles of life, okay, or light for that matter, right? And when I think about redemption, man, I think about that. I think about what it takes to cover a community in redemption. Man, it's knowledge laced with a whole lot of love, right? And I don't know if I got off track in answering your question, but that's what it took for me. And that's what drives me to this very day. That's why, I can, and my children can bear witness. Like I raised them on that, right? I mean, I give them a whole lot of love, and it's a different love than what I may have received coming up, right? But at the end of the day, at the foundation of it, it's love.
So, no, you answered that exactly how I thought you would answer it, because it's the same answer I give people in a different way. I want people to understand that redemption is real, And our most valuable asset in public housing is not the land that we own, not the buildings that we own, not where we're positioned, but the most valuable asset is the people who are in these homes that we manage.
Correct.
We forget about that. We want to sell off all the valuable land. People tell us, this is valuable. I'm like, but there are some valuable people who need to hear this story. They need to understand that there are some people who can sit in this seat one day who live in these neighborhoods that we manage.
Absolutely.
And redemption is a real thing, and people need to understand more people need to come back to these communities that are from the community.
Yeah.
They need to, and we talk about this sometimes in different circles about PTSD. It's real. So many people don't want to come back because of the trauma that they faced when they were there. And that's a real thing that I don't think people will ever be able to understand. That was some real trauma.
For real.
But for those who are strong enough to come back and to share their testimony and the stories, you gotta do it, because you never know, the testimony that you share might be the one thing to help take somebody up to the next level. So man, I definitely appreciate you sharing that, because that's what we need from our folks, so that they can come back and understand the importance of just being transparent and sharing their stories. So man, look, when we talking to real people, time just fly. I got a couple more questions I want to ask you before we jump off this thing today. But I definitely want to be. I want to get these questions to you because I want you to answer. We've talked about it in so many ways, but one of the questions is, how has your experience in public housing influenced your perspective on housing inequality and the homeless community? How's that impacted how you feel about housing inequality and the homeless situation in this community?
Let me answer it this way, right? Because I'm just flowing from the spirit right now. That's how I roll. I don't want to give it any other way. That's why I didn't want to know what the question was going to be. So the first thing that comes to mind is and I don't know if it's the same to this very day, because it's been a while since we lived in the bricks. But back in the day, it was a situation where it wasn't, you didn't have to pay $1,000, $1,500, $1,200, $2,000 for rent, right? It wasn't that expensive for our parents to live at that time, right? I don't know what it is today, but I know that it is not an expensive route for people to go based on all the logistics that are involved, right? So when I think about homelessness, when I think about people who can't afford to maybe live like I live today or like you live, like I think about public housing standing in the gap in that way, right? And I shudder to think what type of life we would have had if we didn't have public housing at the time, right? Because, I was speaking with an aunt, and you and I talked about this the other day, who is considering public housing right now, right? At this stage of her life, right? And public housing may be an answer to the situation that she's in right now. And it can be, and it is, and has been the answer for a lot of people when implemented the right way, right? So when I think about that question, I just think about what it meant for me and my family, right? I messed it up for my mom, and I don't look at it as being messed it up, because it was just meant to be. Like I was, dealing with drugs and all that kind of stuff, and got us put out. My mama reminded me of that the other day, that I got us put out there dealing drugs. So I messed that up for us at the time. But did I really? Because what I did is pushed us out. Like I set up a situation to where we were pushed out, and it's we haven't been homeless since then, right? So I don't know how public housing can really fill the gap with some of our homeless, because I mean that came up in the question, because I've talked to homeless people, and I've had more than not tell me that, hey man, I want to be here. I want to be out here. I mean, very articulately tell me that, hey, this is where I want to be. So I don't know how public housing can help those. Or how do you even implement that? How do you even
Yeah.
distribute that? Right?
Yeah. There are some, but I just kind of want to go back to your question, man. I'm a gap filler. If we look at it that way, it could really impact a lot of people. And the folks who take advantage of this need to understand it's just temporary. It's not
Correct.
designed for us to have generation after generation. It's supposed to be a gap filler.
Yes.
And that's not to
Yes.
put anybody down. That's not to put
Right.
anybody down, because I tell people all the time, sometimes as policymakers, we do just enough to keep people just where they are.
Correct.
We have to make sure everybody understands the programs that we have in place to help them get out.
Yeah. Because we live in a world right now where everything is evolving,
Mm-hmm.
whether we want to accept that or not. Like evolution is real. Like evolution is on the scene, and people that we are helping, all right, we have to keep it 100 with them, as we say in the streets. Like we have to keep it 100. Like this may be an immediate help, but a very, very temporary help and situation. Because
Right.
we've seen it. We've seen people, like, if it were not for Mason Court where we grew up going away, there would be people there to this very day that were there when we were children.
Yeah. Yeah.
If that
Exactly.
if it didn't go away. That's why I've never had an issue with it like that. Like, I mean, because I understand what's happening. Okay. I understand that all things work together for the good when you really, really understand it and see it that way. But we know, like I know, T, like people will just lay down if you allow them to lay down
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the responsibility we got to have as advocates for them and help them understand it's not designed for you to be here forever.
Correct.
What changes or improvements do you think are needed in public housing programs or policies based off of your firsthand experience?
More of us. No, here's the first thing. The first thing is the stigma, the stereotypes that are deeply embedded in the souls of too many people about these people that deserve this fantastic service and gap filler called public housing. That's number one. Okay, that deserves to be done in a spirit of love. I know I'm using the word love a lot, but I'm telling you right now, it is undefeated. Love is undefeated, bro. And I'm gonna tell you right now, it is one of the greatest things that I'm understanding in my life. I know it. You hear me say it, but it's one of the greatest things, if not the greatest thing, that I'm growing into deeper and deeper and deeper understanding of more and more every single day. The improvements has to start there. The mindset, the very energy of everybody that comes to the table has to be in that spirit. And we have to be so discerning, so alert, so aware that we can feel people that are at the table that don't have that spirit. Those people have to be dismissed, Chief. I don't care if they bring $1 billion to the table. Because you notice I didn't start with money.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't start with money. Okay, you said it earlier. Like, there has to be an understanding that beyond the brick and mortar, and metal is the fact that here are human beings that we're dealing with. These are people that we're dealing with. And the people is more important than any of that. And there's just something about the human spirit that responds to the level of spirit that says, you know what? I see you. I see you. I understand you. I want to be of service to you, right? That has to be the first improvement. And then when you got that kind of improvement, when you have that type of energy, you have something that's vibrating at a very, very, very high note, high clip, and then things can happen, right? I said on here in this podcast that I want to make myself available to be more available, to be more present, right? As I exist, okay, I want to be more available. More people have to come to the table with that kind of spirit, man, to want to be a help to people who don't necessarily probably even realize they even require the help that they require. From different spheres of endeavors, there are people available that can come. And you talk about creating some redemption, right? And then here, listen, the word redemption, the word redemption means to buy back. That's what the word redemption means. But nobody is trying to buy anything that they don't see value in. Like people are not, quote unquote, buying things that they don't want or that they don't see value in, right? So until and unless we see our community of tremendous value and be real with it in our spirit, right? We ain't got nothing coming. But if we see it like that, man, there's a whole lot of things we can do.
Buy up the block, buy back the block.
Yes.
But that just means investing in the people. My last
Investing
question, man,
in people.
This has been powerful. This has been powerful. What are some of the things that you would tell the 14 to 22-year-old Shaft now? If you can go back, what would be that thing that you would tell the 14 to 22-year-old?
Oh man, listen, I do. I tell them right now, like, and I'll make sure that I keep it short as possible. And it is short as possible. When I get their ear, listen, man. I'm a big knowledge dude now. Like, and if Miss Palmer and Miss Anderson were here, they would tell you that. And they've told you this too. Like, they knew we were smart, right? We've always been smart. Like, and we come from a community where we had to be smart. And so that would be one of the first things I tell them. Listen, you are smarter than you realize, young people. Okay, you are more talented and have so much genius in you that if you knew just a little bit of it, you would act better. You would be better, right? So I'm always, man, when I get their ear, from young to old, 14 to college student, I'm always encouraging them to have a value for knowledge that's beyond making a grade or graduating or getting a degree. I'm talking about a knowledge of self that far surpasses what you're doing in your quote unquote schools. Because what that does, that creates someone over here that I never talked about love as much as I do, to talk about it in a very real way. Because every time I look in the mirror, I'm saying something about myself that I may not necessarily see now, but it's so powerful that I can say it and affirm it, say it and affirm it, say it and affirm it every single day, because I understand now the power of my mind. So that would be another thing. Understand the power of your mind and understanding that as a man thinketh in his heart, man and woman, as a man thinketh in his or her heart, so are they. So understand and know, young people, that you are creating your world by the way you think. How do I know? Because your thinking is creating how you're feeling right now. Your thinking is creating what you just said out of your mouth yesterday, today, yesterday, and all the days of your life. What you are saying is a result of what you are thinking. So think better about yourself. Increase your thinking. I'm telling these young people, man, as much as I can now, T. And what I'm talking about now is just big thinking. Okay. I'm encouraging these young people, especially when I got these college students with me, right? Hey, you got to think bigger than that. You got to think bigger than that. I just want to get my bachelor's and I'm done. Or I don't even know if college is for me. And it may not be for you, but knowledge is for you. Understanding is for you. Big thinking is for you. Building is for you. Mathematics and science is for you. And my daughter said here, listen to me now. She know I'm so big on this thing. I had a guy from India the other day tell me, T. And they've been telling me this, right? Because I drive for Uber and Lyft sometimes, right? And when they get in the car, I want to know, like, why? How are y'all so strong in math? Well, it's a culture thing. And this conversation is all about shifting culture, too, by the way. Culture has to be shifted. That's why I can sit here today, not a hardened criminal or not landing some casket cold. It's because culture, a personal culture shift took place personally, right? There needs to be personal culture shifts take place throughout our community. Therefore, our community can shift in terms of culture. But my man told me this, T. He's like, man, y'all weak in math and science in this country. That's what he said. He's a professor at UAH. I said, you can say that about your students at UAH? He said, yeah. So I brought that back to my daughter just to tell her, because I've been telling her that. Like, I've been telling her, like, it's math and science, math and science, math and science at our house, T. Like, we strong on that. Like, it's math and science. How would I know to be that force in the life of my children if I didn't learn it? I learned that. We care a little bit about math. This made it get a good grade in school, but we didn't think it was a world changer that it is. But math and science is everything. So it's a lot of different things, a lot of different angles that I come from, man. But at the end of the day, it's knowledge of self with our young people. Because when I learned who I am, when I learned that, man, when I started to understand who I am as a child of God, created in His image and likeness, like, for real, like our young people deserve to understand and know that, like, we look like our mamas and we look like our daddies because we created in the image and likeness of them. Well, you ain't got to go far for any preacher, any minister, anybody that's teaching Bible, or not to make this a religious conversation, for them to remind you and me that we are created in the image and likeness of God. When I began to understand that, I'm like, hold on. I can't sell drugs to my people. I can't put that poison in my own body if I'm a direct descendant from Almighty God Himself. So it's knowledge of self, man. And I'm going to tell you right now, when we start to realize that about ourselves, and then other people that's looking over at us because they may be doing well, right? And they don't think we may be doing so well. And they can change their spirit. They can change their own mental dynamic as it relates to how they see those of us that are in the bricks. You talking about a changed world, bro. You will find those of us that are in the bricks that will do like you talked about earlier. They want to buy up the block, right? They want to create more blocks, right? And they want to create a life for themselves and their family that is honorable, right? That is honorable in the eyesight of God, right? So I will end by saying that piece right there. Like, you talk about improving a community. Like, this is the foundation of improvement.
Man, I told y'all this was going to be a loaded conversation today. Brother, I thank you for just being here and just taking time to share and give back. Consider this the opportunity of coming back, because there's going to be a lot of people who see this on all their social media outlets. Please share it. Once you get it, share it with somebody else. We're starting to get some traction with this thing, there's nothing like a platform. And what we're trying to do with this Life in the Bricks platform is to create some awareness in this community. So again, thank you for your time and thank you for what you're doing. And man, I just appreciate our brotherhood and our friendship, man. And again, this has been powerful. For those out there listening to the show today, find this on all your social media platforms, share it as much as possible. And if you want to dive deeper into Life in the Bricks, there's a link somewhere in this stream that has the link for Life in the Bricks, the book. You can go and find that book. You can get it in on paper or on your Kindle device. It'll just dive a little bit deeper into what we're talking about today. So again, we thank you. We thank our producer behind the stage who keeps putting this together. And man, join us again next time for another edition of Life in the Bricks podcast. Thank you.
Life in the Bricks.
We've come to the end of the podcast today. Please share the link on all your social media platforms. We hope that you all will join us again next time. Until then, keep serving and keep pushing. This has been another amazing episode of Life in the Bricks podcast. Peace.